If your wife insists that black is white, that's enough to make you question your sanity. After all, your wife isn't crazy, is she? If she says black is white, it must be your perception that's skewed. But what happens when it's not just your spouse, but everyone? When the New York Times, CNN, NPR, America's favorite doctor, your poker buddies, what happens when they all tell you children are dying of COVID and the unvaccinated are killing people around them? Reality gets flushed down the memory hole. Perpetual gaslighting has turned millions of people into paranoid, vindictive wrecks who lash out at people that just last year they would have called trusted friends. We'll turn the lamps up to full to see into the shadows this week on Disaffected. One of the strangest things that happened to me happened 5 years ago when I had the blowout with my mother, which I've told you about on this show before. I got a call from her on Friday that the toilet seat was broken in her apartment. This was an apartment I owned, a house I owned. And so I said, I'll come out tomorrow, I'll come out Saturday morning, and I'll replace the toilet for you. Sorry about that. So I got up, went out Saturday morning, took a look at the toilet. Sure enough, the toilet seat was broken. So I went off to the hardware store and bought a toilet seat. And I took it back to the house, and I distinctly remember this because it's one of those unusual things. You're not usually if you're talking to a family member, you're standing in the same room, but I just remember the visual of being on my hands and knees to get at the toilet and screwing this new toilet seat in while my mother and I were talking down the hallway and she was in the kitchen. And I remember saying that the toilet seat was installed. And I was sorry that it was a white toilet seat and not a beige toilet seat, but they only had white ones that fit this toilet, so better a mismatched seat than not one at all. That was a couple of weeks before the major blow-up. That had been building at this point. My mother's erratic behavior, her harassment of tenants in our downstairs apartment, the constant, nearly 24-hour stream of texts and phone calls from her. And then I pulled the plug on this living arrangement a couple weeks after I replaced the toilet seat. And I got a letter at 4:30 in the morning from my mother by email, obviously, saying courier pigeon didn't deliver it to my bedroom. And it was astonishing. The entire 5 pages was astonishing, vicious, projection. By the time I was done reading the letter, my mother had diagnosed me with narcissistic personality disorder and a whole bunch of other things. But the thing that really stuck out for me was her statement that I was such a terrible son, so self-centered, that I wouldn't even replace a toilet seat. What would people think if they knew that I was so stingy and so selfish that I was making my mother hover over a porcelain toilet with no seat on it? And the kicker? For a minute, I believed her. I actually questioned my own memory. I said to myself, my God, did I really not replace that toilet seat? Did I dream that I did that? Did I make that up? This, my friends, is the power of gaslighting. It's a silly story, right? It's a toilet seat. I think it cost $22.50 at Aubuchon Hardware. But when somebody in your life, somebody that you are close to, somebody that you trust, or you think you trust, right, says something so contrary to reality, it can destabilize you and you can begin to question your own memory of mundane real-life events and say, am I the crazy one? I wasn't crazy, of course. Well, I felt crazy for a good long time after this, during the eviction process and everything that entails. But I wasn't actually crazy. I wasn't hallucinating. I wasn't dreaming that I had fixed the broken toilet. I'm still curious about this. I don't know if my mother had convinced herself that she was telling the truth. But I felt that I was crazy, and I questioned myself over something that I knew that I did. It's gaslighting. And this episode of Disaffected, and welcome to it, it's going to be about gaslighting. Reality distortion fields. Last week, I opened the show by telling you about an email that I got with an obituary that a colleague had sent to me, a vindictive, mean-spirited obituary in which the family members surviving a gentleman who had died of COVID blamed President Trump, Texas Governor Abbott, and unvaccinated people everywhere for, in their words, killing innocent people, including their father. Well, you know that saying about how, history rhymes? Well, history is happening right now, and it's starting to rhyme in just 1 week. I have another obituary for you. This one was quoted in the D.C. publication, the newspaper The Hill. And we've got this on the screen here, and I'm going to read to you the first paragraph of this obituary. So it says, Clark Allen, founding member of Clinton First Aid Squad, Clark R. Allen of Lantana, Florida, passed away July 22nd, 2021, at the age of 84. Clark died due to COVID-19. He was infected by someone who chose not to get vaccinated, and his death was preventable. It is the wish of the family that everyone get vaccinated in order to prevent further death, sickness, and heartbreak. And I said last week when I read the other obituary that people are in grief, and grief makes people say and do things that they wouldn't ordinarily do if they were in a better frame of mind. But I'll tell you, my sense of compassion is getting stretched very thin for people. And I don't care that it's grief that may be motivating this. But using obituaries to shame other people, to blame them, to externalize the grief and the fear that you feel when someone dies, I don't like seeing this becoming normalized. So why is The Hill putting this obituary out there? Let me give you a couple of quotes from the article. Headline says, vaccinated man dies in Florida. Daughters share their anger and urge people to get vaccinated. Somebody said on social media that this was not a story in The Hill about a man who died of COVID. This was a hit job on the state of Florida, and I'm inclined to agree with that person. This was all about how Governor Ron DeSantis is killing people in Florida because he won't mandate masks and he won't mandate vaccines. A couple of quotes from the daughters featured in this story about the death of their father. And by the way, I should tell you, The Hill story, I didn't see them mention this man's age. That's important. So the daughter says, he was infected by someone who chose not to get vaccinated, and his death was preventable. Next quote. It was a relief when he got vaccinated, but the reality was he was around a lot of unvaccinated people, Danielle Allen, who lives in Portland, Oregon, said. I'm attempting to not be very angry at unvaccinated people, and it's becoming extremely difficult. We're all really angry and struggling. Yeah? Well, attempt more, Danielle, because it's coming through. Last quote I'm going to give you. If he was in Connecticut or Oregon, he'd most likely still be alive. Really, Danielle? Here's what the article didn't tell readers. This gentleman, Clark, was 84 years old. He had chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, what people commonly know as emphysema. Okay? 84 years old with emphysema. Not at all uncommon for an 84-year-old, who, by the way, has already lived several years past the average life expectancy for men in the United States. Not at all uncommon for people this age who have lung disease to be taken away by the flu, by a cold, by COVID. Of course, his death is sad. But again, 84 years old with emphysema. How does his daughter know that he got this from an unvaccinated person? Has she not been paying attention to the news? Because the news is telling us now that vaccinated people are also capable of spreading this. Why are the daughters urging everybody to get vaccinated if their father himself was vaccinated, but the unvaccinated status of other people around him is apparently powerful enough to overcome the protection from the vaccine, which obviously it is. The man still got COVID. Well, we can't really be sure of that. We can't, actually. We should be able to be sure of that, but we can't. Because deaths that are comorbid with emphysema, diabetes, advanced heart disease, heart failure, congestive heart failure, drug overdoses, I've seen evidence showing that if this person had a positive PCR test, their death is diagnosed as COVID, even though they died with COVID and not of COVID. So I don't know that we can be sure exactly what he died from. But this is distorting reality. This is anger, fear, frustration, some of which is very understandable. Grief does derange the mind. But the constant drumbeat from the major media about be scared, cases, we need to lock down, we need to lock children down. This has driven people to the edge. And we're at the point now where respectable political newspapers, like The Hill, are just running this stuff as propaganda. Well, there's a lot more propaganda this week. It's sort of, I tried to think of a theme to the show this week, and gaslighting is certainly one way to describe it thematically, but there's just so much out there. It's a little bit of a pick and mix. So let's get into the next one. So we've got here a couple of tweets from an epidemiologist named Eric Fiegel-Ding, who's been quite animated on Twitter and other social media, talking about how important it is to get vaccinated and how much in danger our public school children are and our teachers are. And he featured a few images from a video of a teacher having an emotional issue. And the first one here we've got on the screen, I know that a lot of you see this, but part of the purpose of this show, especially if you're a newer viewer, in this show, we take a look at the psychological dynamics that underlie behavior that we see in public, and we try to help people connect this behavior with psychological phenomena such as cluster B personality disorders, narcissism, borderline, emotional instability, but also the kinds of emotional instability and lashing out at other people that normal range people experience when they are being targeted and abused by gaslighters and personality disordered people. And I think that some of that is going on with this woman here. I think she's in such a highly anxious state that she's acting this way. Eric Fiegel-Ding, however, is making sure to foreground the emotional histrionics here. He wants to create a feeling of fear and sympathy in people. So he says, sobbing teacher, And he gives a quote from her: "We're trying to protect our students from a mass shooting that we know is coming and cannot do anything about, except to stop the onslaught of students and staff who are likely to get sick, and that makes me sick." Okay, mass shooting. All right. We've got another one here. I think we have one more image of from Eric Fiegelding's Twitter. So he says, "Teachers are now actively discussing how to find affordable attorneys so they can make a will if they die." Oh, for goodness sake. Well, let's see what you think. Let's roll the video of our sobbing teacher.
I have had my regular back to school anxieties, things like, am I going to have enough time? Am I going to get my lessons done? Are the students going to be okay? But this year, there is this overshadowing apprehension that's clouding my normal back to school thoughts. And it's with thoughts like, if I die, who's going to take care of my children? And if I end up in the hospital, how am I going to pay those bills? And if I give COVID to my students or my own children and they die, how am I going to live with that? And I want you to ask any teacher how they feel this year, and I'm sure that they will tell you that they have never experienced anxiety like this, because it is like we are trying to protect our students from a mass shooting that we know is coming but cannot do anything about. Except we can do something about it. It's just that not everyone agrees that wearing a mask will stop the onslaught of students and staff who are likely to become sick, and that makes me sick. And in the meetings that I have been to since we've been back, I hear teachers planning like regular, but I also hear them having conversations about finding affordable attorneys so that they can make a will. And we're talking about making emergency sub-plans and quarantining and going to the hospital. And after, in my district, we found out that we have to use personal and sick days if we have to quarantine and that those aren't paid. The constant dialogue is how those bills are going to get paid. And we're wondering what legal rights we have, because we don't have mask mandates in place across the board. And across the board, we're worried. And we're tired of fighting parents who feel like mask mandates violate rights. We want parents to know that we are on the same team.
Oh my goodness. This is a textbook example of emotional dysregulation. Okay? I am not certain, as I listen to her and as I watch her and her facial expressions, I'm not certain the degree to which she believes what she's saying and really is this anxious, and the degree to which she may be exaggerating some of it for rhetorical effect. I'm going to be charitable and take the assumption that she really is highly anxiety-ridden, because I find that very plausible. I am highly anxious lately for different reasons than this woman. She's one of the reasons I'm anxious. The fact that people pay attention to this and find it reasonable and don't say, okay, this is somebody who needs to learn how to manage her anxiety because her fears are disproportionate and unrealistic. Those people are making me anxious. So I'm going to be charitable and assume that she really is as stressed out about this as she says she is. But this is emotional dysregulation, and it's what happens to people when they are living in a reality distortion field, where people are acting as if children are likely to die from COVID when they are so unlikely to die from COVID. It's one of the, what do you call it when something's not a leading cause of death, a trailing cause of death? It's so unlikely that there are some states that have recorded 0 pediatric COVID deaths. That's how rare it is. This is something that should make us happy. This is good news, right? When we learn that our children are not in danger from something, that should be a moment to go, I'm going to exhale and let that anxiety out. But people don't want to do that. They just want to ramp up their anxiety more. I think this woman is stoking her own anxiety. I think she's making it worse for herself. But she's putting it out there on social media and making it worse for other people as well. And okay, so I can't be completely charitable. She's hearing conversations from colleagues about finding affordable attorneys to make a will. Bitch, have you never heard of LegalZoom? I mean, are you kidding me? First of all, it's not the 1960s anymore. Teachers are not poorly paid, okay? These are not people who are working for barely above the breadline level wages, okay? I think they can afford to consult an attorney. But nobody actually needs to pay a high-priced attorney. There are do-it-yourself will kits that are valid in every state. I mean, it's very easy to see them online. Let's go to the next one. Next part of our reality distortion field. This time from New Zealand, and this part of the world is scaring me even more than the Northern Hemisphere is. We've got, in Australia, some of their cities and states have activated the military to enforce COVID protocols. I have not been able to confirm to my satisfaction all of the context that would explain some of the things I've seen, so I can't say for certain that this is what's going on. But I've seen videos that purport to be police or military members in Australia taking children away from their parents to get vaccinated against the parents' will. I have seen videos of cops and military arresting people and citing them in public for being outside their house without one of the approved reasons that their state has allowed them to leave their house for. And New Zealand is run by a mad woman. This is Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern announcing a lockdown this past week. Let's take a listen.
Stay local and do not congregate. Don't talk to your neighbours. Please keep to your bubbles. It comes down again to those very simple principles. We know from overseas cases of the Delta variant that it can be spread by people simply walking past one another. So keep those movements outside to the bare minimum, wear a mask, and make sure you keep up that physical distancing.
Wow. Couple of things here. For those of you who are listening and not able to see the visual, amazing. I said this on Twitter this week. It's so goddamn brazen that I missed it the first time around. I'm highly attuned to this stuff, and I missed this. What did I miss? She's telling everyone they've got to be masked up constantly. This crazy bitch is standing there on a podium within 2 feet of another woman who is interpreting this into sign language. Neither of them are wearing masks. This is how brazen they are. She's telling you to wear masks, but she doesn't have to wear a mask when she's standing 2 feet away from another person who's also unmasked. Hey, do you see it yet? I mean, do you see it yet? And what is she saying? Keep to your bubbles. Don't talk to your neighbors. We know that the Delta variant is so severe that it can be transmitted just by walking by other people. Nonsense. Nonsense. That's outrageous. Delta variant. You know what, folks? I don't even believe in the Delta variant. It may be true, but I don't have enough information, and the people that I have been used to getting this information from, I no longer trust to tell the truth. How do they know the Delta variant is the particular virus variant that is infecting Sydney, Australia, or Auckland, New Zealand, or wherever it is? How do they know when they say so-and-so is struggling in the hospital with the Delta variant In order to know that, they would have to genetically sequence a biological sample from each individual patient. Do you really think they're doing that? Because they're not. What is this based on? Why should we trust them? And this shit is getting ready. Well, it's coming to America. It's starting here now, too. This week, there are 3 cities so far in the United States of America that are bringing in vaccine mandates. They are New Orleans, New York City, and San Francisco. This information is from an article in the Deseret News, which is the paper out of Salt Lake City, Utah, also citing some information from the Washington Post. So, New Orleans, in order to go to a bar, restaurant, gym, or stadium, they are requiring proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test. And again, I should not repeat this. This is not a COVID test. This is a PCR test, polymerase chain reaction, that is not always able to distinguish between COVID-19 and similar coronaviruses. Okay, so, and it doesn't appear that a PCR test actually can diagnose an active and symptomatic infection. I mean, people are getting positive tests back, PCR tests, saying, they have COVID, they're infected, but they have no symptoms at all. And if it really is showing that they are infected, some infected people may be asymptomatic. But this is not a diagnosis of virulent and active illness that is either likely to endanger that person himself or people around him. I haven't seen any evidence yet that asymptomatic transmission is something that happens in any great numbers. It's just not there, but people keep repeating it. Which cities will be next? New York City. They won't accept a negative COVID test. Now you have to have proof of vaccination to enter a restaurant, gym, or indoor performance venues, music halls, nightclubs, that sort of thing. San Francisco, you need proof of vaccination to enter a bar, gym, restaurant, or any indoor entertainment venue. But listen to this in San Francisco. If you go into a restaurant and order takeout, you don't have to be vaccinated. You don't have to show them anything. Why? If this is so dangerous that you may not go to a restaurant and ask to be seated at a table unless you can provide proof that you've been vaccinated, why is it not dangerous enough to require the same thing of patrons who walk in, just like the table-sitting patron walked in, but instead of sitting at a table, they stand in a line? Why? It must be like the magic that I've noticed in restaurants where, there must be a Nobel Prize for whoever can figure this out. How it is that the virus knows when to be lethal and when not to be lethal, because it is apparently bug shit deadly if you walk from the front door to a restaurant table. But as soon as you are seated and put your posterior down on that nice banquette, it's not dangerous anymore because that's when your mask can come off. Let's give you one more piece of insanity to round out this segment. The Oregon Pediatric Society, medical organization for pediatricians, concerned with children's health, educating parents. Take a look at this graphic they've put up. Tip number 1, help your child mask up. And they've got a picture, they've got 3 photographs going 1, 2, 3, left to right. Oh my God, this is so creepy. Showing the various stages of acclimating your child to being masked up. So the first one depicts a smiling child with a mask under her chin. Picture number 2 shows the mask just over her mouth, but not yet over her nose. And picture number 3, which is, I guess, we're supposed to call the winner, or yay, we got it, we made our goal. The whole entire lower half of her face is covered. And the big word underneath this is desensitize. Try each step for 2 days, 30 minutes each day. Step 1, start with the child putting the mask around their chin. Step 2, move to wearing the mask over the mouth. Step 3, now wear over the nose and mouth. Even if the child is wearing the mask incorrectly at first, this is still a win. They are on their way to mask wearing. Just keep encouraging. It's right in front of us. It's right in front of us. This is, I know I've used it before, I'm going to use it again. The analogy of the frog slowly boiling to death in the pot, where the temperature rises so slowly and so incrementally that before the frog can figure out he's in danger, he's already boiled and cooked. But they're telling you to do this. This psychological conditioning. You know, and they're suggesting it because these things work. There are instances in which this kind of stepwise approach is actually wise. If you have an anxiety about something, for example, I have a debilitating phobia of heights, right? It's so bad that I have a difficult time in some public buildings taking open staircases higher than 1 story, especially the kind that have no walls on either side that go up multiple stories and you're just hanging out in the air. A real difficult time with that. And I know that I should be getting on top of that. And one of the ways to do that is that stepwise desensitization. Go up to 1 story, stay there on the landing until you feel okay, then be a little braver, take another step. It's not that this method of getting people used to something doesn't work or is always bad. It does work and it isn't always bad, but the fact that we're using this to get children used to this unnecessary and frankly really creepy protocol of wearing masks is what disturbs me. So there's so much more. Come back after the break. For more conversation on the dark and disordered psychology that shapes today's cultural and political left, subscribe to our weekly audio podcast on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Google Podcasts, and virtually anywhere else you get your podcasts. Let's learn to recognize these dynamics and call them what they are. Subscribe to Disaffected to learn how to break the spell.
We now have a bonus for our supporters. You can help the Disaffected podcast grow and receive invitations for our off-air Zoom hangouts by becoming a supporting member on Patreon or Subscribestar. Patreon users, go to patreon.com/disaffected. Subscribestar users, you can find us at subscribestar.com/disaffected. Check out our webpage at disaffected.fm for the complete list of ways you can help support us, and thank you.
Welcome back. A little bit of housekeeping I didn't do at the top of the show. You remember last week when we rolled that clip of Congresswoman Cori Bush talking to the mother of several children that she had initiated a fundraiser for on CNN? Well, come to find out, that wasn't even the children's mother. It was their babysitter. So it was even faker than I knew when I talked to you about it last week. How are we supposed to believe anything? Oh, and I also want to give, I'm sorry, I can't remember your name, but one of you who is a viewer listener left a comment last week, very kindly saying, because you saw me sweating last week, and I'm sweating this week too, very kindly saying, why don't you take the jacket off? You don't need to dress up for us. Well, I dressed up for me, okay? It's for me. But I took your advice, and this week the jacket is off, and I'll tell you why. Folks, when you live in the Northeast, and I noticed this in the Pacific Northwest too, when I used to visit friends out in Washington, you live in a part of the country where people say, oh, you don't really need air conditioning because it's only hot for a couple of months here, so blah, blah, blah. Air conditioning never became as universal up here in the Northeast as it became in the South. So a lot of the buildings here do not have central air. This is a professional building that we're in this studio, no central air. So the only thing you have are window air conditioners and portable air conditioners, and I have to shut them off when I do the show because the noise of the fan and the compressor would be too irritating. So thanks, Yankees. Thanks for the we don't need air conditioning. So back to gaslighting. Gaslighting and memory holing. So this week, well, I'll use this social media post to jump off here. So we've got up on the screen a man named Eric Hartman, not Eric Cartman, Eric Hartman, says, wow, the American Academy of Pediatrics is actively deleting entire sections from their website, re Early Childhood Development and the Importance of Facial Cues for Learning. They are memory holing decades of known and accepted medicine, all because they have embraced forced masking of our nation's children. Wow. Well, he's right. And he had receipts. I went to the website of the American Academy of Pediatrics, and I didn't look through every possible link on the site, so I may have missed it. But I could not find the things that he said used to live on this website. It did appear to me that, yes, in fact, they have memory hold these things. So what sorts of things have they gotten rid of from their parental advice section that they used to have until a week ago, but don't have now because it might make people ask questions about how you can reconcile child development with a mask mandate? Here's an example. This is a screenshot of a portion of one of their parental advice pages about how important it is for the emotional and linguistic development and social development of your child to interact with them and have playtime. So it says, you can do these things. Find a quiet, cozy place to cuddle up with a sturdy book or two. Name and point to pictures your baby shows interest in. Act out pictures using your face, hands, and voice. Copy the sounds your baby makes and the looks on her face. This kind of back and forth talking lets her know you care about what she is saying and feeling. That's one example of something that's gone. There's another one. Disappeared as of this week. I know this graphic is big and you're not going to be able to read all of the text. I pulled out a couple of portions to highlight for you. This is titled First Visit, FaceTime and Emotional Health. So this is about how it's important to have face-to-face interaction with your baby. So, where are my borderline glasses? There they are. Okay. With time, your baby will link your voice, touch, and face with a soothing sense of safety. This early bond with you is the start of important social, emotional, and language skills. Subheading, topic, make time for FaceTime. By the time babies are 6 to 8 weeks old, they may smile back when they see a face. These social smiles are both smiles. As your baby grows, social smiles lead to conversations. For example, when you smile, your infant will smile back. When you coo, your baby coos. When you laugh, he laughs. So far, so good, right? We all know this. It's uncontested advice in the literature about child development. It's known to any parent who pays attention. And interestingly, this just occurred to me. Interestingly, one of the ways that researchers have tried to identify the dysfunctional ways that mothers with borderline personality disorder interact with their children and what the effects of that might be, they do something called the still face test. Observing how babies react to parents or caregivers who do not mirror their emotions when baby laughs or baby cries or baby expresses some other sort of emotion. If the mother or the caregiver's face just remains completely blank, it causes the baby distress. And they've drawn a connection between later emotional dysregulation in children and the early maternal experience of having a mother with borderline personality disorder who is herself emotionally dysregulated and either neglects to engage that baby face to face, mirror their emotions, or maybe even gives negative emotional feedback to the baby when the baby is expressing positive emotions. So, food for thought. Let's move on to Dear Kurt Eichenwald, journalist. What is his resume? Yes. Kurt Eichenwald. He's a journalist, author, former New York Times writer. And this is somebody I have watched over the past couple of years get more and more emotionally dysregulated over leftist politics, more and more frantic, to the point where sometimes he seems almost crazed with anger at anyone who does not comply with his version of what good liberals do. This is what he had to say this week. There's been a lot of chatter this week about what we should do to the unvaccinated. Eichenwald says, it's time to really focus on a key fact. The unvaccinated will kill many of the vaccinated. They are taking up ICU beds across the South. If you have a heart attack, a stroke, trouble in emergency surgery, there is no place for you to go. You could well die for their stupidity. Really? The unvaccinated, the undeserving, is what he really means to say. They don't deserve a hospital bed. They other with a capital O. They are dirty, is the implication. They are selfish, is the implication. They are disease carriers, is the implication. And they are not full citizens like you are. They're taking away things that belong to you. Their selfishness might even kill you. This is dangerous talk. So how do people respond to this? It's not possible to know what a random sampling of people on the street would say if they were presented with something like this, because social media is self-selecting. People tend to congregate around people whose opinions they share, sometimes congregate around people whose opinions they don't share so that they can get into fights with them. So I don't know how this would shake out if we could actually do a really well-controlled study. But even accounting for the self-selection of people who are likely to have this disposition showing up here, it still scares me how many of them I see. And I just picked a sampling for you of reactions to this. So somebody named Mike Hickman says, suggestion: call a state of emergency. Call in FEMA with big tents, Federal Emergency Management Agency. Every time an ICU is needed, move an unvax, that's his name for them, move an unvax, outside for whatever care they can provide. Take care of the kids and true citizens requiring care. Unvaxxers don't fit my definition of a citizen anymore. I want to repeat Captain Kirk's line from Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. Earth, Hitler, Germany, 1938. Amy reacted this way. God, I don't want to feel this way, but I do. If they are unvaccinated by choice, they must not take the resources away from those who have an emergency situation. Having a stroke or heart attack is not a choice. Refusing a life-saving vaccine is, and that must come with consequences. What consequences? Amy doesn't want to say that because she doesn't want to feel this way, but she kind of does feel this way. What she's saying is they can die. Fuck them. Bury them. Get a casket ready. Die. That's what this is. Die. Having a stroke or a heart attack is not a choice. Well, it isn't a choice. But if we were to extend this logic to people who have strokes and heart attacks, and this includes me, I had a heart attack at 36. Drinker, smoker, overweight. Those were choices I made. Oh, and it's very, very clear. It's been very clear to people like me, former smokers, fat people, Yes. Yes, people do think that we deserve what we got. So I think this is just for convenience's sake, because I think that the kind of people who would say things like this would say the same thing about the people who chose to have a stroke or a heart attack because of their bad lifestyle choices. Anything to demonize anything to other people. Whenever you're scared, make somebody else the enemy. Diana Jensen Kramer said this: and if not manslaughtering the vaxxed, they're making life difficult. Manslaughtering. Nice verbing of a noun, Diana, by the way. It's been true all along to varying degrees. Thinking of a friend who was pregnant last year, had her baby in December, everyone's fine. Still, she was stressed out over conditions when she was going to give live birth. So we're stressing her pregnant friends out too if we're not manslaughtering people by choosing to be unvaccinated. Rita says they, the unvaccinated, will also be responsible for lost businesses and school closures and the economy collapsing. And for children dying, let's not forget kids too young to be vaccinated. No ICU for unvaccinated. That's Rita's prescription. Hey, Rita, get fucked. You can all get fucked. The bloodthirstiness of these people, the absolute bloodthirstiness. Children, do I have this coming up? Do I have to talk about it now, or did I make a note to talk about this with you later? Yeah, it's coming up later. We're going to get to how many children are actually affected by this. And we've got one more reaction here from Pat, who says, and this is not the only person I've seen say this week, unvaccinated COVID patients should be on palliative care. Palliative care is a fancy word for comfort care. Drugs to keep a person unconscious, sedated, out of pain, because they will be dying, and there's nothing you can do about it. Palliative care is a term you often hear from people who are on hospice care. So Pat thinks that the unvaccinated COVID patients should only be getting palliative care. Keep them comfortable until they die. Don't tell me that this is fear. These people are motivated by fear. It's fear that's gone feral. It's fear that's gone pathological and that's making them act pathological. But it's not only fear that's motivating them. They are taking pleasure. Sadism is a motivating factor here. This is sadism. This is taking pleasure in imagining the hurt and pain caused by someone else, especially if you can witness it in front of other people. Not just fear, also sadism. Let's move on to a meme from Occupy Democrats. You know, I used to subscribe to this shit. These were the people whose memes I reposted on Facebook, I reposted on Twitter. Oh, my God. You know, it would be a funny episode of the show if we could do this sort of like Star Trek style where there's a transporter accident. I get into the transporter, and then all of a sudden there's two me's on the other end, like when they split Captain Kirk into Evil Kirk and Good Captain Kirk. We should split 2021 me and 2014 me and just have a cage fight. You guys could place bets. So this is for goodness sake. I have no idea who this guy is except that he's a blue check mark on Twitter, which must mean he's one of my betters. Richard N. Ojeda 2. Indulge me for a moment, friends. Makes my skin crawl. People who call themselves so-and-so the second. Ugh. There is no such thing. If you have the same name as your father is Harold Smith Sr., you are Harold Smith Jr. I don't care that you don't like Jr. There's no such thing as the second. That's just pretentiousness. You are Harold Smith Jr. until your father dies. This is the old etiquette way. And when he dies, you become Harold Smith Sr. if you also have a son who's Harold Smith and he becomes the junior. All right, enough of that. So Richard says, this needs to become law. You don't want to be vaccinated? Then don't take up resources for those who are doing everything right to protect each other. You don't want to listen to the doctors? Then don't run to them when you can't breathe. Piss off. Okay. You also, Richard, you can get fucked too. And this is what he's promoting. This meme from Occupy Democrats. Breaking news, it says. Harvard-trained Dr. Vin Gupta demands that anti-vaccine activists be denied major medical treatments because hospitals are overfilled with sick children who should be prioritized for treatment. Pass this on if you agree with Dr. Gupta. Naked sadism, naked violation of the Hippocratic Oath. I don't know why this doesn't scare. Yes, I do. Why do I keep saying I don't know why? Yes, I do. Because when people get scared and they believe that they are in the encampment of the righteous, there's no limit to the fantasizing they'll do about other people being boogeymen and what terrible things those boogeymen deserve. And you know what? Hospitals are not overfilled with sick children. That's not true. It's not true. You don't have to... And it's not a matter of opinion. It's so frustrating. The people who make these claims, who claim that they are following the science, which is just their religion now, the science, they say, my opinions come from data. This is coming from data. I'm telling you this from data from the goddamn CDC and from state epidemiological reports. It is not true objectively that hospitals are overflowing with sick children from COVID. You can count numbers the same way I do. If you add 5 and 5, you'll get 10 and I'll get 10. Even if you really hate me and you saw that I got 10 first, so you really don't want 5 and 5 to be 10 because I'm a bastard, you're still going to come up with the same thing. Can we at least agree on that? No, we can't, apparently. We can't agree on that. It can't be true if somebody you disagreed with says it. Got another tie-in to something we talked about last week. Do you remember in the beginning to the middle of the show last week, I played you some video from a meeting that was given as an in-service to teachers at the Westford Essex School District here in Vermont. It was about critical race theory. It was led by some clinical and social psychologist named Dr. Jillian Boudreau, who, in a very nice butter wouldn't melt in my mouth tone of voice, cooed and simpered at those adults in a very caring way to say some really uncaring things about the motivations of white people and how they exercise their privilege and how they oppress black people on a daily basis, even if they don't mean it. Well, she, or whether it was her or the young woman who introduced this, I think it was the young woman with the upspeak who introduced this. We're going to use person first language, and it's important to remember that we're not dealing with disabled people. We're dealing with people with disabilities. So we've got person first language coming at us again, this time from biotech pharmaceutical company Novo Nordisk. Put this on the screen. This is an advertisement in the form of a tweet, but it's an advertisement. And it pictures two men, and the man on the left is extraordinarily obese. I would peg him at 450 pounds. So not fat, not pretty fat, but so obese that he's not going to live long. He's not going to be long for this world at that size, right? Standing next to his brother, and apparently the man pictured in this meme is an employee of Novo Nordisk, who they are exploiting. And the copy says this: having a brother and son with obesity means being an ally for those with the disease is personal for Novo Nordisk employee Mark. Hear his story. Catch the language there. I'll say it for you again. Having a brother and son with obesity It's a strange formulation, isn't it? You don't usually hear that. Somebody who is with obesity. It's like saying somebody with cancer, somebody with heart disease. It strikes the ear wrong. And it's an example of this person-first language. They're calling obesity a disease. And the strapline I forgot to tell you is why obesity is a misunderstood disease. So several things are going on here. First of all, we have to dance around it linguistically. We can't say this is an obese person. We have to say that we can't even say this is a person who is obese. We have to separate off obesity into an almost personified construct of its own. This is a person with obesity, with the disease of obesity, which is misunderstood. I didn't bother following up on this ad, but I bet I can tell you what's misunderstood about it. Because it'll likely be like folks' health that we talked about last week, right? That you can be healthy at any size, that obesity needs to be in quotation marks, that there's no good evidence that diet and exercise work. This is what people who want you dependent on their products do. This is how they talk. Gross. I have a good example for you in this next clip it could be many things. Although many of you listening will recognize this immediately, there's always new people who are listening to us every week. Thank you very much. They may not recognize this. And this woman that I'm about to show you this clip of, she has an audience. And this audience doesn't recognize her for what she is because they're whooping and hollering at her. They think she's a savior. Let's take a listen to it. Then I'll tell you what I think about it.
On behalf of white people.
On behalf of every white person who ever discounted you, I apologize. For every company that passed you by because of the ignorance of them, because of the color of your skin, I apologize. For every time we spoke ignorance out of our mouth because we didn't even know what we didn't even know, I apologize. Because as a mother raising two African-American women, I am offended how they're treated because of their color of their skin, because of the wave of their hair, because of their fullness of their lips. I'm offended. And I have to take responsibility for that for my culture, because my culture is too afraid to say something. But I'm standing here with my sisters and brothers in this room that are of any other nationality, skin color, to say we love you, we adore you. And if we could do it all over again, we'd do it all over again and make it right. I know I'm not that, but I stand with people who have been that for you. And I would be irresponsible for my community, who would never have the courage, who would never let their ego or their she-go be humble enough to fall at your feet and ask for forgiveness. Because I know when you do that, when we do that, when our community does that, miracles happen. And if I can be the voice for everyone who's afraid to, it gives them courage and power to do that.
Yes.
And I know that, and I appreciate you, and I celebrate you for acknowledging me in that.
Oh. Ego or she-go? She-go. I don't know this woman's name, but she describes herself as a profit coach. This is clearly a business conference. I don't know her from Adam. But I'll tell you what I see in this. Well, in many ways, it's very like what I was talking about last week. It's this phony Eva Perón drag, right? I love you. I'm working on behalf of all of you unfortunate people in the community. I'm standing up for you. I am humble. Love me because I love you. Love, 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 love. I don't see love here. I see ego and she-go. I see covert narcissism. And it's almost a little funny to describe it that way because, you know, to a lot of us, it's not covert at all. It's very obvious that this woman has an ego the size of Texas. It's humble bragging. Humble bragging is another way of describing some forms of covert or veiled narcissism, right? We expect, when we think of narcissism at pathological levels, we tend to think of people who are grandiose and say, I'm the best at this, I'm the smartest, I'm the most beautiful, I'm the this, I'm the that. Some of us have a harder time identifying it when the bragging comes in the form of a reversal or the opposite. I'm such a terrible person. I'm such a blinded white person. I'm so privileged. I have all of these advantages that I did nothing to earn. That's bragging too. You're bragging about how very enlightened and aware you are and how your heart is moved, being such a privileged person with so many advantages, to give them to people who don't have them. Well, I want to point something else out here too. If I heard her correctly, this woman says that she is the adoptive mother of a couple of black women. It seems sort of strange way to describe your daughter. I mean, maybe they're grown women. But she's ashamed and appalled at how her daughters are discriminated against because of the color of their skin, because of the fullness of their lips, because of the wave of their hair. Come on, honey. Come on. Really? You really think that your daughters walk in, somebody notices that they have full lips or wavy hair, and they just decide that that means she's a devil, and they're going to treat her badly? This is just so ridiculous. I mean, what about the white women with full lips and wavy hair? I know, she'd say, well, it's all about the melanin in their skin. And if you didn't see this, if you couldn't see this and you were only listening, not watching, she actually got down on her knees in the audience. It looked like she was hosting a talk show. She got down on her knees. It's like a tent revival, right? This is the kind of narcissism that you see in televangelists. Jim Bakker, Jerry Falwell, Joel Osteen, any of these people who preach the prosperity gospel. That's what she's doing. She's a profit coach. She's had all these advantages that she didn't earn, and she's very, very humble. It's just a tent revival. That's all it is. We've got more from the grab bag. We're going to take a break. Come back for the last segment of the show. For more conversation on the dark and disordered psychology that shapes today's cultural and political left, subscribe to our weekly audio podcast on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Google Podcasts, and virtually anywhere else you get your podcasts. Let's learn to recognize these dynamics and call them what they are. Subscribe to Disaffected to learn how to break the spell.
We now have a bonus for our supporters. You can help the Disaffected podcast grow and receive invitations for our off-air Zoom hangouts by becoming a supporting member on Patreon or Subscribestar. Patreon users, go to patreon.com/disaffected. Subscribestar users, you can find us at subscribestar.com/disaffected. Check out our webpage at disaffected.fm for the complete list of ways you can help support us, and thank you.
Welcome back. I want to give a little credit for that video clip that I showed in the last segment. That comes from the guys at Myth Informed, Brian and Sean. Thank you very much for posting that. It was very useful to me. And as we round this show out, I want to remind all of you that we're talking about living in a reality distortion field, living in a world that is lit by gaslight. These words are overused. They've been emptied of meaning by people who misuse them, people who are actually performing these psychologically abusive actions, have themselves accused other people of doing it. That's the projection, right? You're like a mirror. You bounce it back. You say, it's not me, it's you. But nevertheless, they're real. Gaslighting is real. And it's happening right now on a massive scale. When everybody that you trust, that we trust, right? Legitimate media, mainstream media, corporate media, legacy media, CNN, the New York Times, NPR, your friends, Occupy Democrats, the Democratic Party, your favorite lefty politician. Not that people on the right don't do this stuff, but why do I talk about it on the left? Because the left is in power right now. The left right now has a greater number of perpetrators of these abusive techniques than the right does, and they have the cultural microphone. So it's not that I think that people who are on the right of the political spectrum are somehow immune to this. I do not think that. But I won't say, no, I won't both sides with you. If anyone is thinking of that, I won't agree with you that they're all just as bad. No, they're not. Not today. Not in 2021. No. It is lopsided, and it is the left right now. If the pendulum swings, and it will swing, and I'm worried about that swing. I know that some of you are worried about it too. I worry that the reaction to this deranged lefty fantasy land, where everybody can be whatever sex or gender they want to be, where we have to call men women and women men, where we have to pretend that children are in danger of dying from disease that they're statistically immune to, with very few exceptions. I worry that when this bubble breaks, when people have had enough, and for goodness sake, can people please have had enough soon? Can we get there soon, please? Soon would be good, because there is a point of no return. I don't know where that point is, but there is that point, and it would be real nice if we could get there soon. When it happens, reactionaries from the right are going to have a field day. I worry about whether we're going to have an actual rollback of women's rights, an actual rollback of rights for gay people, because we've all been hooked in. We gay people, we've been saddled to the trans train, and it is the trans train that is going off the rails and trying to take the rest of society, including children, along with it. And when people react against that, are we gay people going to be swept up in it? Are our actual hard-won, legitimate legal protections going to be in jeopardy because of this? I worry. So, let's move to a little bit of talk about the American withdrawal from Afghanistan. I don't have much to say about this. I'm not going to talk very much about it. I'm not a foreign policy person. I don't know enough to comment on it in depth. It seems obvious to me that this withdrawal was terribly managed, very, very badly managed. But I couldn't believe what I was seeing coming out of ambassadors to the UN, United States ambassadors to the UN, and spokespeople for the State Department. Well, I'll let you see what you think. Let's cue up that clip of spokesman Ned Price at the State Department.
Additionally, the UN Security Council issued a joint press statement earlier today calling for a new government that is united, inclusive, and representative, including with the full and meaningful participation of women. The Council spoke with one voice to underscore that Afghanistan must abide by its international obligations, including to international humanitarian law, and ensure the safety and security of all Afghans and international citizens.
Really? Full and inclusive representation, respecting the rights of women, the full participation of women. Really? How? In what capacity? Serving wench? Rape outlet for aggression? Kindling for a bonfire? What full participation, Mr. Price? Because that's what the Taliban does to women. What is wrong with us? What is wrong with us? We call on them to allow for an inclusive and representative. Inclusive? I hate that word. I hate that word so fucking much. Because it's supposed to make you feel good, but it says nothing meaningful. And sometimes, and this is one of those times, it's used in a way that is utterly perverse. Inclusive Taliban. It's another example of 2014 me fighting 2021 me. I never thought I'd be sitting here saying these things. But you know what we look like in front of the world? We look weak. We look like pansies. Limp-wristed fops. And I do not care whether you find that distasteful, because that's the truth. We look weak because we are weak. You do not interface with a government of religious fanatics who believe that women are chattel slaves and property. They are there for men to rape, burn with acid, keep locked up in the home, swaddle them from head to toe in a burqa, and you use the goddamn word inclusive? Have these people ever set foot on a street anywhere outside of their neighborhood in their entire lives? Do they have any idea who they're talking to? Is anyone a grown-up? Anyone? Totally disconnected from reality. And so's the New York Times. Almost every week, I think to myself, I knew they were bad. I knew that they'd been taken over by propagandists. I know this from reading them. I know this from former editors like Barry Weiss, who tell the tale of what it was like to try to do journalism at the New York Times. But every week they seem to outdo themselves. They get crazier, nuttier. This week, this is another example of the kind of gaslighting that we've been talking about on all of our recent episodes, where voices of authority simply tell you that black is white, up is down, and that you're foolish not to know that black is white. You think you can know something? You can't know it. You don't have senses. You can't think about things. We haven't told you that it's true, and you have no reason to believe anything is true until we tell you. One of the ways they do it is saying there's no evidence. There's no evidence that X is true. There are no studies showing that X is true. They do it. They tell you, yeah, this is how they do it. This is how they got people like me. This is how I stayed hooked into this stuff for too long. When you are a liberal leftist, one of the ways that you construct your identity, one of the qualities that you try to cultivate, that you are rewarded for cultivating in yourself and rewarded if you notice and encourage in other people, is sophistication, intellectual depth. Sophistication, right? And one of the ways that you are supposed to be sophisticated is by appealing to something higher and better than what we call common sense. You don't operate on common sense if you're a sophisticated person. You're an intellectual. You know better. Your mind is on a higher plane. You go to studies. You have nuanced discourse about things. You talk to engaging people who drink Prosecco, right? The limousine liberal set. That's what this is. You're sophisticated. They flatter your ego when you're a member of this set, and you do this to other people. I did it to other people, by making you feel sophisticated. And so you are trained to start disregarding anything labeled common sense, any direct input from your senses that contradicts the party line. You decide that you're not seeing things correctly, or you're not thinking about it in an in-depth and nuanced way enough. And so you start to denigrate the idea of anything called common sense. Well, common sense, that's for rubes. That's for uneducated people. That's for white trash. That's for people who live in the ghetto. That's for those stupid, right-wing, conservative, fundamentalist Christians who are wholly unlike me. They're dumb and they like being dumb. But I am sophisticated. I don't have common sense. I have data. This is all the New York Times does anymore. So this week, what are they trying to normalize now? Remote working from the office. And I can anticipate the objection. I'm going to try to answer it. I'm not saying that working remotely is always bad. There are situations where it's very good. Yes, I agree with you. The objector I'm imagining in my head. Well, I'm not really imagining, because we do get these objections. That's why I'm anticipating this. Yes, there probably are some jobs out there that should be made remote. They might work very well for you. I do some remote work too. I get it, okay? Remote work is okay. Now, that's dispensed with. Isn't it? But it can't do everything. And there are trade-offs to styles of working and styles of living, right? You gain some, you lose some. You have to figure out where that balance is for you. This week, the New York Times, we've got this image on the screen. There's no evidence that working in person is essential for creativity and collaboration, experts say. It may even hurt innovation. Pardon me while I take a blot break. What are you going to say to me this week in the comments? Why are you wearing a shirt? You don't have to dress up for us? It's just going to be like next week. No, don't worry. I won't subject you to that. There's no evidence that remote work harms creativity and collaboration, experts say. You catch it, right? Experts. These are people who know. These are sophisticated people. You're stupid, unsophisticated, if you think there might be something lost if you never actually sit at a table with your colleagues, if you never have lunch with them. You don't want to be unsophisticated, do you? So listen to the experts. Listen to your betters. The reality distortion field example. God, they're so brazen. The next governor in New York State, so we know that Andrew Cuomo, after having been accused of sexual harassment but not charged, interestingly, will be resigning his post. Not for any of the decisions he made about sending senior citizens with COVID-19 back to care homes to infect other senior citizens who then died. Nope, not for that. The accusation of sexual misconduct is we can only care about one thing at a time in America. So the next governor who's going to succeed him is Kathy Hochul. I don't know if I've got her name right. We'll see. Here's a picture from the governor's office website showing to-be Governor Kathy Hochul with 7 or 8 other adults and 6 children. They're all smiling. All the adults are standing in one line. The children are lined up in front of them. All the adults have great big smiles on their face. And the children, I don't know what expressions they have on their face because they're masked. Why? Why? The person who put this on Twitter that I took this picture from, she says, "Do you see anything disturbing about this picture?" I sure do. And I don't know why everyone doesn't. And I looked at the reactions to this, and it was as you would expect. The majority of people, well, let me phrase it another way. Anyone who objected to this and said that it was creepy or disturbing was rounded on by the mask brigade. So one person said, "Children must not use masks." And the response to this, woman says, "What then? How do we protect them until they get the virus?" I'm not even sure what that means. How do we protect them from what? Protect them from what? Children don't die from COVID except in very rare cases. To a close approximation, children are immune. Before you object, please remember the phrase "to a close approximation." I'm not saying that no children ever died, but the number of them who die is so small that to a close approximation, statistically, COVID is not a fatality worry for children. We know this. This is what I have a hard time understanding. We know this, and we have known this since near the beginning of the pandemic. It's not disputed. I'm not saying something that contradicts the CDC. You can look at the numbers. You can look at the state epidemiology reports. We know this. That's not even considered controversial until it is. And it is an everyday conversation. We must protect them. From what? From a cold? From what is basically a cold? And one more image here. This is a guy reacting to a conversation about whether children should be vaccinated, whether they should be masked. Oh, and as we record this show, the news is that the Food and Drug Administration is set to give full approval to the Pfizer vaccine on Monday, even though the clinical trials, aren't supposed to be done until 2023, but they're kind of useless anyway, aren't they? Because even people in the control group have started taking the vaccine, which spoils the study. Oh, I'm sure it wasn't planned. I'm sure it wasn't. You knew. As soon as the FDA gave emergency authorization for use of this vaccine, you knew this was a done deal. It did not matter. From that moment, science stopped mattering. Injury rates, fatality rates, side effect rates, that stopped mattering the minute they did that. There was no way the FDA was ever going to fail to approve this for use after convincing the majority of the public to get it and to clamor and scream for it and cower in terror if they didn't have it. This was a shoo-in. Was never going to be any different. Don't tell me about the science. Don't tell me about how you respect the science. You are a cult member if you speak this way. If you respected the science, you would be able to admit when somebody like me says, "Do you understand that these are experimental?" Even saying that, that's a fact, by the way. These are, by definition, experimental. They are in the experimental stage. Even saying that provokes hysteria from pro-vaccine people. No. What are you objecting to? No. Doesn't matter. The science. So this guy says, vaccines are only authorized for ages 12 plus. Those kids aren't 12. I think he's reacting to the picture of to-be Governor Kathy Hochul. You guys claim to be pro-life, but are okay with literally killing actual living children because of freedom. And he spelled freedom with random capitalization to make it look like anybody who says the word freedom or anyone who objects is a stupid, unsophisticated, fundamentalist, right-wing bigot. right? Good Lord. So what are the numbers? How badly... Seltzer refresher. How badly are children affected and in what numbers? I looked. As of July 29th of this year, 2021, only 358 people 18 and younger, so children, minors, only 358 minors have died of COVID-19 during this entire pandemic. 358. And I'm not sure that I even believe that, because I know that a lot of people have died of COVID who didn't die of COVID. We know this. We've already seen it. Walk in front of a train to commit suicide. Up, positive PCR test. COVID death. Stage 4 cervical cancer, ovarian cancer. Had COVID, COVID death. 358 kids. How does that stack up to other causes of death for minors? 1,800 kids approximately die of cancer every year. And according to the CDC, and I can't give you an apples-to-apples comparison, that's another thing. I'm noticing how much more difficult it is to compare like sets with like. I think these agencies are actually deliberately doing this. I think they're taking away data that would allow you to have one age cohort so that you can't directly compare these things. I can't prove this, but that's what I think they're doing. It shouldn't be this difficult to match data. Never used to be. 636 kids, according to the CDC, died in car accidents in 2018. And that's only kids 12 and younger. I could not find the data set that said 18 and younger, compared to the 358 kids who allegedly have died of COVID. So not only are children not dying except in blessedly very rare circumstances, they're also not getting ruinously sick. These people I quoted earlier who are saying hospitals are filled up with sick kids with COVID, it's not true. That's not happening. This should matter. It should matter. It should matter to citizens. It should matter to people of goodwill. It should matter to people who care about the society we're living in, who care about themselves, who care about their families, and care about their friends. If you really cared the way you say you do, this should matter to you. I want to close up by talking about pattern recognition, recognizing things like gaslighting, recognizing covert narcissism, recognizing grandstanding, recognizing people who dupe us. I get a lot of communications, and I appreciate that. I get more of them. Even though this show is only 6 months old, it's already getting to the point where I can't actually respond to all the messages that I get, whether they're email, private messages on our Facebook account, private messages on our Twitter account. I mean, it's a nice bounty, right? I mean, this means that people find what we talk about and what I talk about interesting enough that they want to communicate with us. They want to share their story. They want to put story ideas in front of us. This is wonderful. I couldn't ask for anything better. But it does mean that, folks, if you contact us and I don't get back to you right away, it's a question of volume. I'm already at the point where I can't respond to everybody. But one of the common things that I get asked about is, well, people want to know, how do I recognize a psychopath? How do I recognize a sociopath? How do I recognize a covert narcissist or a borderline or a grandiose narcissist? Fine. I'm putting myself out there as somebody who can help you to learn these things, right? So it's a natural question, and I'm glad you ask. But a lot of people ask it in a way that indicates to me the degree to which we have been trained to listen to experts and to formalize, maybe formalize isn't the right word. People ask for checklists. Okay, they engage in checklist thinking. So someone will say, can you give me a list of signs so that I can recognize a psychopath? Or can you list out 6 behaviors that I'll be able to take and so I can know when somebody's a borderline? I understand where it's coming from, but I want to push back on that a little bit. It's not a stupid question. I'm not criticizing people who say that, but I am suggesting I'd like you to rethink how you are thinking about this. This kind of knowledge cannot be given to you in a checklist. I'm not trying to give you a systematized and formalized protocol that has a decision tree on it that says, if A, go to B, if not A, go to C. Yes, that means you have found a psychopath. It doesn't work that way. There are tells, there are common behaviors. This show is full of them. Whether I do it well or poorly, depending on who you are, this show is full of tells. I talk about it constantly. I give examples. I play you videos. I play you sound clips. I read to you the words of other people. And I try to relate these when I can to stories about people that have been a part of my life who've displayed these personality disordered or abusive behaviors. I believe this is the best way for people to learn this stuff. It's how I learned it, right? Nobody gave me a checklist. And I said this in one of the very early episodes of the show, that I wasn't going to come on and bring out the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders and read you the 9 formalized traits of borderline personality disorder, then the 9 under narcissistic personality disorder, for a couple of reasons. One, they're abstract statements. They don't usually contain actual examples, so it's a little bit harder for people to see how it's operationalized in real life. That's why I tell stories to illustrate these things. I give examples or vignettes, right? But checklist thinking is not going to stand you in good stead. While I do want to teach people, you listening to the show, you watching the show, I do want to teach you. I do believe that I have expertise that can be helpful to you. I think I'm very good at detecting abuse patterns and understanding what's going on psychologically with the people who are in an abusive dance with each other. Yes, I do think I'm good at it. I do think you should listen to me. But the but there is, I don't want to be a capital E expert for anyone in the way that we have been trained to think of Tony Fauci as an expert with a capital E, or the New York Times as, the paper of record. I don't want to go that far, and I don't want to present that to people. And I would say if you are looking for checklists, reconsider. I know that part of the motivation for looking for that is people want a fail-safe, right? They want to know, hey, if I follow these steps and I pay attention, then I'm going to come to the right answer. It doesn't work that way. Sometimes you will, for sure. But sometimes you won't. There are going to be gray areas. I would like to help you understand it in a more holistic way, in an experiential way, through the stories that I tell, that I hope and I suspect actually provoke memories for you of interactions you've had with people like this in your life. That kind of connection making that goes on in our heads when we learn from the experiences of other people, that to me is more durable and flexible knowledge. That's knowledge that you can work with. And it also helps train your gut and your intuition, right? Intuition and gut is necessary. You can't rely only on your intuition and your gut feelings, and I've talked about this before, we have gone way too far to the other side. We have denigrated our intuition. We treat intuition like that was a synonym for a metaphysical claim, like a woo-woo thing like tarot cards, or I just have a sixth sense. That's not what it means, right? To somebody like me, it means a subconscious way of your body and your mind processing actual sensory data, touch, smell, tone of voice, real physical world things that you can't quite articulate, but they give you a feeling. That feeling is not everything, and you can't rely only on that, but it's a very good beginning. And learning to understand the place of your intuition and how it can work alongside your intellect, that's what I'd like to bring you to. So I understand what you're asking for, but I won't be giving you checklists. I won't be giving you worksheets. I think that would mislead you. I don't think that it would help you as much as you think. I hope to give you a way of thinking about it and a variety of options that are compelling, that are interesting, and that spark connections in your mind between the things that I say to you on this show and the experiences that you've been through. And most of all, I want to show you how much you already know. All of you listening to me right now, all of you have experience with this stuff. You may not think you do, but you do. You've all met cluster Bs. All of you. You've all had that kind of fraught relationship with a coworker or a family member, even if it wasn't as extreme as my experience or the experience of some other people. This is about making connections. It's what happened for me when a lifetime of experiences in my family that I thought of as episodic weren't episodic. They were part of a narrative arc. They were part of a comprehensive system, a perverse system, but a system that functioned on rules that could be identified, a coherent system of pathology. That's what learning the term cluster B did for me. Learning what borderline personality disorder was did for me. It sorted out a lifetime of episodic experiences, and instantly, it's like you could actually see things slotting into categories. Ching, 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 ching. That's what I want to do for you. You already know a lot of this stuff. You just need to know how to connect it. So thanks for joining me for this week's lesson, and I'll see you next time. For more conversation on the dark and disordered psychology that shapes today's cultural and political left, subscribe to our weekly audio podcast on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Google Podcasts, and virtually anywhere else you get your podcasts. Let's learn to recognize these dynamics and call them what they are. Subscribe to Disaffected to learn how to break the spell.